Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Founders in LA podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight through a product lens on some of the exceptional startup founders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one take organic conversation. With us today in the studio is Jason Sharp. Thanks for coming down, Jason.
Hey, really excited to be here. This is exciting.
Oh, this is going to be a good one. I really enjoy what we're going to talk about in this conversation. But first, a word from our sponsors. Founders in LA is brought to you by United Club. United Club is a co-working space that sets itself apart. With 3 locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, United is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices, they provide an inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With United, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, this podcast studio, plus standard 3D printers and 24/7 access to any of their locations. They're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join United Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.united.club. That's UNITA.CLUB. We're also brought to you by the Product Managers Association Los Angeles, available at pma.la. They're the largest professional organization for product and designers in LA, with more than 5,000 members from over 600 companies. They host monthly meetups, organize a product leader council, and have a mentorship program where they connect working product managers with students from underrepresented groups to build a better and more diverse next gen. To learn more about PMA, go to pma.la. Our guest today is Jason Sharp. He's the CEO and co-founder of Yumi. Jason, can you just give us a 30-second description of Yumi?
Yeah, it's actually pronounced Umi, which is okay. That's a common mispronunciation. I have a lot of customers that actually say it that way because it's based on Umi, which means ocean, and our mascot's a penguin. It's about diving into the ocean, immersing yourself in a language. What Umi is a language learning app using TV and movie clips to teach you. So instead of the traditional digitalized textbook and gamified system, we're using, multimedia. We're using actual TV and film to teach you what actual people say. If you want to learn to understand natives in a foreign language, you should study what natives say. You should study how they talk. And the best and actually most fun way to do that is to watch clips from film. It makes sense on TikTok and YouTube. Why doesn't it make sense in language learning? And actually, it works, and it's been a pretty cool run so far.
Yeah, and you actually use material from footage that people may have seen. Like you use scenes from TV shows that may have been viewed by your viewers, which is so different from when I was back in high school taking Spanish, and they would have just like some workbook and some actor was paid somewhere, and it didn't really have any relevance to what my interests were at the time. With Umi, it definitely feels different because I see something I would probably watch on my own time anyway, but now it's immersed in this language learning.
Yeah, connecting to the content is really important part of motivation. Motivation is a key problem when it comes to language learning. A big reason why is because it takes so long. Language learning can take up to 4 years to get to a point where it's pretty useful for you. It's a lie if anybody tells you it takes 3 months, and there's a lot of scammers out there that say that. Honestly, it's a really long process. And so it should be fun along the way. The way that other apps make it fun is through a lot of tricks and bells and whistles. And what we thought when we started this was, well, why don't we go to the end goal for a lot of people? And a lot of people's end goal is to enjoy their favorite film without subtitles, to understand what the actors are saying, to really understand the emotion behind the words, the actual words that people are saying, and they want to understand it without subtitles. We're like, well, that's the reward. What if we give that to you along the way and we make it easy to learn through those clips and things that you've already watched, maybe with English subtitles, but you'd like to understand the content deeper? What ends up happening with this is you end up understanding the culture a lot better because you see the scene, you see why they acted the way they did. And now you understand the language behind it, and language is thought. And so you're exploring the culture, you're connecting more with people because there's a face on the screen to the words that you're saying, not just a cute little bird being angry at you for not studying. And that kind of connection drives a different level of motivation. And I think that's why we're seeing some really good early success.
Well, and then it's interesting because thinking back to my usage of the app, the the content that I was seeing, it did seem like it was more, uh, I guess, more. It came from the culture that it was. It wasn't like I wasn't like watching Game of Thrones with the Spanish subtitles, right? It looks like the for me it was like using the Spanish version of it. So it looked like there were TV and movies, but they were more from a Latin American source rather than repurposing something that was made in England and just putting on the subtitles. So I didn't. If you do that, you don't get as much as a cultural context.
Correct.
And I didn't put that together as putting the language learning and the cultural context together into one piece.
Yeah, and we have a few competitors, and one of them does that. They took like Friends, for example,
Mm.
and teaching Spanish, they'll do Friends in Spanish. It's easier to produce it that way, but it loses a lot of the point. And so that comes to like, why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? There's a lot of reasons to learn a language. Not everybody really cares that much about the culture, but a lot of people do. There's heritage learners. Maybe their grandparents came from somewhere. Maybe they came from Brazil or they came from Italy. There's people who want to travel for work, or like I said, people who really enjoy film. So if we took Friends and we just used a dub version, I think it would defeat the purpose. Even though you actually can learn a language this way. Learning a language, you just need enough exposure to the language and study enough of the structure and the words and listen to it enough, and you can learn it. You can learn in class. You could learn through Duolingo, although very slowly. That will take you like 10 years. Um, but but the motivation's the problem,
Mm.
and then what content you're getting exposed to is going to keep you going. And I think that's the difference with what we're trying to do, is that we want to tie people in to the not just the language but the culture, because behind a language is a culture, is a people, is a way of thinking and a way of life. And if you do it through film, that's the best way. That's the the door into another world, I think. And that's helped me. And that's how I've learned. I speak Mandarin Chinese and I speak Japanese. And I think the only ways I was able to reach this high of a level is because I have the other cultural side to it. And a lot of speaking, if you think about language, okay, even in English, there's misunderstandings if you say the wrong thing or the wrong intonation. That's why text messaging isn't always the best idea, because you miss a lot of the undertones. Well, it's the same thing for a foreign language. If you don't understand any of the situation around why you're saying the words, you're going to be misunderstood. And
Right.
you're going to say things in inappropriate situations, or you're going to hear something and think something else, but it really means this other thing over here, because people talk differently. And even if it's a one-to-one translation, it might not be used in the same situations. And so if you get it through film, if you get it from the horse's mouth, you see the situation yourself, you slowly become aware of how they use language and the ideas behind the words. What do they really mean to these people? And then that's a stronger connection as well. So you're going to be misunderstood a lot less.
So how did you come to found this type of app? It's not just another language app from what I'm hearing. This is more of a language and culture and trying to get more in depth in tune with this world so that you can become a part of it. So how did you find yourself, dedicating your life to solving this problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I started off as a language learner myself. I studied abroad in China, and so I learned Chinese. And I actually got very engrossed in Chinese film. And I think a lot of my success was through the mass consumption of Chinese film.
Okay.
Yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was my first entrance into it. And from there, I just fell in love and kind of went down, um, you know, a path of just watching everything that there was and watching a ton of TV shows. And then when I finally studied abroad there, I already understood a lot more uh, about the culture and people, and kind of dove into it. But that's like how I started off falling in love with language learning in other cultures, is my experience studying abroad. And then I eventually lived there for a very long time. I lived there for 10 years.
Okay.
I also lived in Hong Kong for a time, and I've lived in Tokyo for a time, and I studied Japanese as well over the last 3 years. And just the experiences I've had with people from other countries, either immigrants here or myself when I was in other countries. It's such an amazing experience talking with people and learning about the way that they think and how different it is from the way that we think. And that was my main kind of like, okay, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. I'd like to learn more languages and meet more people from other places. And um, so when I started learning Japanese a few years ago, I went through all the apps. I was like, okay, let's see what's the best way these days to learn, because it had been a while since I learned Chinese. And I realized there hasn't been much of an evolution in the space. Of course, ed tech moves very slowly. And I already knew and had figured out that watching film was the best way to do it. And especially like Netflix with all of their foreign film catalog has been amazing. I was like, well, who's doing something along these lines to make it easier? Because it's really hard to just raw watch a film. There's a lot of things that are very difficult. There's a lot of words that come up that are very difficult. It's hard to understand and get through it.
Right.
And I found that really there were a few entrances trying this, but a lot of them didn't really have it correct. Like it was still pretty far off. I was a part of a language learning community, a few Discord groups, very avid Reddit user in the r/language learning, r/learn Japanese, and some of these other subreddits, and listening to what other people were talking about, the methods that were successful for most people and unsuccessful, which apps were good for whatever reasons. I was like, man, there just seems like a big hole in the market for people to really try to get to fluency through. It's this immersion method, which is basically learning through exposure to the language, and most of that's through film. So I thought, okay, well, let's see if we can solve a problem here and make it easier for people to learn. And Umi wasn't the first idea. I had started with something else. Part of the Discord group I was in was upkeeping this very complicated spreadsheet of like which films were better for what levels and which books were better for what levels. And it wasn't analyzed very well. It wasn't easy to get access to this thing and figure out where should I go. If I started with this one, then I watched that one. What's the next one in line that I should watch? Because based on the words that I learned or words that I was exposed to. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do something in this space and replace this process that people are using for selecting immersion material. So I created like an IMDb for language learning, where it's like, here's all the list of all the shows for your target language and ranked by language difficulty. And here's the words that you're going to learn out of each movie. And if you watch this one, then here's the next recommended one for you. Started there.
Was this as a company, or was this when you were first looking at Reddit and you were first looking at the Discord channels, were you viewing them through the lens of, I'm a founder, I want to start a company? Or at that point, was it still, I'm a language learner and I just want to figure out how to better learn the language?
I had thought about starting a company. This isn't my first rodeo.
So it was more market research.
It's a little bit of both. In the past, I'd mostly done companies in the space that I was very familiar with. I was still very passionate, which is in gaming. I come from a gaming background. But I wanted to do something that I was passionate about outside of gaming. So it was a little bit of both. I want to solve a problem for myself and for people around me, but I'd also like to see if that can turn into a business at some point. So it was a little bit of both. And I was looking for co-founders, and I was like, hey, does anybody want to try to solve this problem with me? And yeah, that's kind of just how things got kicked off, though.
And then
that was actually just last year, by the way.
Yeah, and the growth has been phenomenal. I'm thinking about how you have put yourself in the shoes of that person, right? How did you go about trying to find your first like paying customers? Because right now, Umi's out there. It's got real users. It's got real paying customers. How did you find those first customers?
Good question. To be honest, in the beginning, I was not very smart about it. Okay. We did not start charging for quite a while. The thought was sillily is we'll get retention first, and then we'll figure out monetization. As long as we can get people to use this and they think it's valuable for language learning, then we can eventually monetize it. I don't believe this is true anymore. I think that was a bad approach. I think we should have tried to find something valuable. And the only way something's really valuable is somebody's paying for it. There's definitely some spaces where you don't do that, like social, where you can make money later. Where once you've hooked people into, I don't need to go into that, but yeah, from language learning, it wasn't smart. But I got my first 1,000 signups through a Reddit post that went viral,
Wow.
which was a good sign that I was on to something. I knew I was on to something when I made a Reddit post, and through the Reddit post, I got 1,000 signups.
Did you
And
know when you're writing that Reddit post, did it feel like, oh man, this is going to be good, like this is going to happen, or was it more like, hey, you just kind of steadily, you're consistently doing things, and then all of a sudden, the timing was right and it hit?
um, I've never been that confident. Like it's always questionable. Like, oh my gosh, is this going to go out? I mean, I still feel that these days. Like, I have like an influencer posting about my app, a sponsored post, and I'm almost like, oh, is this going to just be? Is this going to bomb? I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter how prepared you are. There's always that, in the back of your mind, like, ooh, is this going to bomb? Is this really, going to work? When I was writing the Reddit post, I was hoping for just like 100 signups at most. But I will tell you, there's a feeling that you get if you've been in an industry for long enough, because you've gathered so much information, and your brain is this pattern recognition machine, right?
Right.
And you might not consciously recognize it, but your intuition says there's something here. And I believe that I was working into a zeitgeist, and I believe that there is a growing and very soon to be out of control zeitgeist in the language learning space,
Hmm.
because you can see it in the number of startups that are starting with kind of similar ideas, the number of posts that are happening where people are, hey, would this be better, or and the kinds of questions people ask. Um, and the technologies that are coming out and the way the world looks, you can kind of feel that there's this gravity towards a certain idea. And when I started working on this, it just felt so right. I was like, there has to be something here. And and I think that the virality on Reddit was just showing that, yes, you are tapping into the zeitgeist. Yes, there's a lot of people that care about what you're doing, and we need more creators to figure it out. And so, while we didn't retain all those 1,000 signups, although I got my first annual renewal the other day, someone who signed up a year ago
Oh wow.
for a different pivot of the app, and has renewed their annual subscription, which is really cool. Um, but like we retained some people, but not a lot of them. But they loved that we were working on this idea, and they were supportive of it and wanted to come try it because they're begging for something in this space. And so that's like, after I posted, I had a feeling that it could hit, but I still wasn't sure. And then when it went viral overnight, woke up in the morning, I was like, oh, okay, number one post for the month. This is crazy. It was just like, well, this is obviously something I need to dedicate myself to.
And was that first 1,000, was that one of the first 1,000, or how did you get to like customer one?
Customer one was after the IMDb fiasco. It was very quickly we pivoted off of that, because we're like, well, we're not going to keep people on a site just to search what video to watch next, right? We
Right.
need something consistent so they come back daily, and so we needed content on the site. So we did a YouTube watching learning experience, and then after that, we finally pivoted to a mobile app, which was using YouTube Shorts as our core content,
Okay.
and so like basically teaching through YouTube Shorts. And that's when we got our first customers. We're like, hey, let's just put in a payment, and here's the value we'll add to it. It was still free overall, but what we did was we added these little custom teaching segments. So if you started a lesson with the short, you would get hand-picked like explanations, like handmade. Actually, I made all these in the beginning, explanations of what they were saying, and that you had to pay for. But if you didn't want to, you could just watch the shorts with some tools and learn the words that they were saying, for free. And we got some people to pay for this. Those customers, the very first paying customers, were people we had gathered an email list from the very first, Reddit posts, and even the IMDb, website, and then onto the YouTube website. We gathered up a good amount of emails at this point. Not that many, just over 1,000, I think, right? And so just blasted to them, hey, look, we've got a mobile app now. We had maybe 30 people in our Discord channel, and say, hey, anybody want to check out the mobile app? It's live. Love to get some feedback and see what you guys think. And like the first day, we got a paying user.
That's incredible. Um, there's so many places to go from here. I think one thing that I've heard you talk about that I'd love to tap into is maybe it's the way you can react, the speed at which you react to users, and how you take their feedback and how quickly you're able to turn it around. Um, so I guess for context, so you have a Discord channel and folks make requests or they have feedback. How do you approach that? How has that been working for you? And it sounds like it has been working for you.
Yeah. I
So
think
first of
it's
all, you have a
yeah.
Discord channel where they
Right.
interact. They can interact with you specifically.
Yeah. I don't know if most people are as obsessive as I am with it. I respond to Discord messages usually within 5 minutes.
Wow.
I'm working most of the day and I have Discord up, and that's where me and my co-founder do most of our discussions anyway. And customer feedback is the lifeblood of any company. And we have a lot of now, luckily, very dedicated, community members, and we actually have community collaborators now. But even in the very beginning, if you get a message, hold on for dear life. Hey, somebody cared enough to give you feedback. And so I've always just really cared a lot about it. And I'll be like, hey, let's jump on a call. What do you mean about this? Tell me more. What's your study sessions look like? What else are you using? And just really dig into every person that joins the Discord. Or if they don't join the Discord, and I'm trying to figure out what are some of the other places I should manage for people who don't have Discord. It's just Discord is such a great community management tool. But I digress. Going on to like how I actually manage it right now. Basically, it's just keep it open, and there's like a channel for feedback, and you can create a post, like a forum post, basically for whatever you'd like. And I'll always respond very quickly. And when I'm thinking about what to build for the week or even for the day, that's where I go first. I say, hey, look, what have people said? How many upvotes did this get? And
Mm.
how many comments are there? And how does this fit into some of the other data I'm seeing? How does this fit into some of the other things that I've been seeing, or even my thoughts on linguistics, thoughts on teaching, and thoughts on product? And how does it all fit in together? And sometimes it's counterintuitive. And so what I'll take is like, okay, this is a counterintuitive idea. It's not the first time I've seen someone say this. I'll pull everybody in a big update. I'll be like, okay, everybody, we're gonna have some votes, put some items on there, including some of the counterintuitive things. And sometimes I'm just like, whoa, okay, everyone really thought this way. So I was just, one of the things was um, we were thinking about developing some larger features. Not too long ago, this is like a month ago, and there were some larger features that actually some people had asked for. They were part of my standard thoughts about where this would eventually go over the next, 6 months. So I was like, okay, these seems like we should make these things. And then I just randomly put on there, I was like, oh, quality of life stuff. And I put a couple of examples of some what I thought were small things that some people had randomly asked for here and there. And then 95% of the votes were for the quality of life things. And I was like, really? You guys don't want big features. You just want quality of life updates? And they were just a couple of things. I'm like, these things would take me 15 minutes to do. And they're like, yep, that would be more valuable than this giant other feature. I'm like, okay, cool. So it's like there's a lot of this process to where you think, typically when we're internal, we tend to think in roadmaps, we tend to think in long term, we tend to think in large features, but users just think in annoyances and emotions. And
Mm.
like they're not thinking about roadmap. They're just like, hey, I hated this thing, or man, I really want this button to do that. And that's big to them because they use it every day and they run into these problems all the time. And if you fix those problems, they really love you for it. Yeah, so I kind of go through this process a lot now to where it's like, okay, I've seen all this random feedback, but I'll just do a big poll like once a week, like, hey, and then I'll put little things, I'll put big things, and see where everyone's heads out.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Just the the idea that if someone reaches out and they'll get a response from you in 5 minutes is fantastic, and that to be a user, to be a member of that Discord community, and know that my voice isn't only being heard, but there's action being done very swiftly. I imagine that goes a long way towards loyalty. So I know you only been around for a year, right? A year or so.
Yeah, this pivot iteration, it's hard to talk about a company when you've been pivoting, right? Like, how do
Right.
you talk about
Right.
it? Like, Umi launched at the end of January of this year, and it's so different than what we launched out last year, but it's adjacent still. It's in the same
Right.
space, kind of trying to solve the same
And you
problem.
still carry over the customers from
Some of
the
them,
first one. Yeah.
some of them. Although the most hardcore language learners from the very first group, my very first Discord I was in, almost none of them are interested
Hmm.
because they're like purists. They're these yeah, I like to think of it as like science versus business, and like they're the purists who go to the scientific papers, which I read all of them, and I used to be very based on this too. And they're like, no, the science says this, so that's all I do. I'm like, yeah, but people's psychology, like, is it actually easier that way? Like, but they're like, no, you've gone too far away from the pure study methods. And so we lost a lot of those people. But I think so. The company started officially like last May.
That's great. And so when you're talking about roadmaps, you're talking about not using large features to anchor where you're going next. And in a previous conversation, we had offline, you once talked about, anti roadmaps or not having a roadmap for different types of companies. Uh, let's Can you just describe, what you're seeing right now at Umi and how you guys are doing road mapping?
Yeah, I really like this topic. It's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and it comes from and I was a product manager for a long time as well.
Right.
Um, is very oftentimes roadmaps tend to disconnect from the needs of a user today, and
The
they don't.
immediate needs of the user today.
Yeah, today,
Yeah.
and the further you plan, the further from accuracy you get because you've changed the pool of data when you make a release, and that might change everything. It's a butterfly effect. And so the accuracy is a big problem. And then the other thing is attention and time. Your attention is a big cost for startups. And putting any attention onto something in the future that you might do in the future is very costly today. The cost today is higher than the cost in the future to go back and do that same thing. It's because that attention that you could have spent today, just like if you put money in the stock market and it started compounding, you're compounding your attention. And so the more attention that goes into the thoughts of what might happen, and then that gets wasted, that's like at a big discount. But anything that you can put your attention on that's guaranteed, so this is like a high accuracy task, gets compounded like directly. And roadmaps get thrown out constantly. And I've made this mistake a lot, and a lot of companies I've worked at love road mapping because it's all about consensus and vision, and it's a lot of ego. I got to be honest. It's very, very rarely, but sometimes it's not. But it's very rarely based in actual customer data feedback. Like, it's not grounded in reality. Um, and so what's it based on? It's based on our visions and our wishes. And users and customers are going to prove you wrong constantly. And that's the point. They prove you wrong and you navigate the seas, right? You can
Right.
have a kind of North Star of what you're trying to accomplish, but the more you try to plan your route specifically when you don't know which way the wind is blowing, the more likely that you're just going to crash and you're going to waste all of that attention. And so over time, I've shortened the backlog. And actually with backlogs, like I don't like writing down ideas just to have them written down. If a good idea will come up again,
Hmm.
it will. If it's important enough to do it and it's valuable enough, it will be obvious to do when it's time to make another decision. Like, sure, there's some things that you'd be like, okay, I don't want to forget this. It's important for this other thing, maybe. But most of the time, it's a misunderstanding of how you make decisions and how ideas come up. If they're coming up because your users are yelling at you and because the data is pointing at something, then it will keep coming up. And the greatest thing is the next time it's time to come up with this idea, you will be smarter. You will be better at doing your business. You will understand more about your customers, and you might even come up with the idea slightly different. So I don't do backlog grooming. I don't keep a backlog actually, what I do is I keep like the things that I have two columns on a Kanban board. I have what we know we're going to do. This already has enough user data to say this is guaranteed to be done.
Right.
And then I have another one under investigation. And these are things that users have said or things that seem to be problems from data, um, or from something I've seen, some feedback, some bug reports or something, and they need some investigation. But past that, I don't keep anything because it's a drag on your attention. And what ends up happening when you keep these things, just like if you keep a lot of things in your closet at your house, is that you see them and you want to go over them, and that's what always happens, especially with programmers. Is that they'll be like, well, it's time to think about what to do next because we finished all of our tasks. Now let's go over the backlog and see which ones are important. This is the wrong way to approach it. It's throw everything away, sit in an empty room with a whiteboard. What's most important right now? Open up Discord, open up our data dashboards, open up our reports on our NPS scores, open up our Google and iOS like reviews. That's where we start. And we say, look, what have people been saying? What's our biggest pain points? And at the top, we look at, okay, are we still growing? Is there business problems here? Always start fresh because then the best ideas will bubble to the top. If you start with the backlog, you're going to end up filling your week with stuff that doesn't do anything. Anyway, that's the way I kind of look at it.
Well, that's interesting. So, and I can't help but think back to some of the larger companies I've worked at, and the sheer number of hours that went into planning for things that we didn't accomplish in that time frame. So we had these things called, PI planning, was essentially, quarterly planning. And I think I did the math, and at one point it was like we had a 17% success rate in the things that we had planned, and spent like 2 days for the entire team. Stop, hands down, no one's actually doing work, but we're planning for 2 days every quarter. And it was 17% accuracy that we would accomplish we accomplished 17% of the things that we set down to do. And it was not efficient. This is interesting. It's very radical to say, hey, let's not have a roadmap. And I guess to play devil's advocate, it would be, um, would you be able in this way to handle some of those larger features? So for sure, like smaller things like quality of life, as you're saying, for your users, or minor bugs and fixes. I think that makes like I can't agree even enough that, hey, when you look for stuff to do, don't dig deep into the backlog, because if you're looking at a ticket that's older than, let's call it, a month, that customer is either accepted that this is what life is like now, or they said, hey, I'm going somewhere else, right? So for many of those kind of smaller issues that are just no one really cares about, then maybe you just don't fix. To your point, look at what people are talking about right now. And I think something gets lost in those bigger companies too, is if you have that ability to fix the thing they're complaining about within a short time frame, that's how you build some real loyalty, that
Yeah,
they like feel like, oh wow, something didn't went wrong, but they listened to me and they fixed it. I love these guys. But in the no roadmap world, how would you handle like a bigger feature, or is that included? Could you do a bigger feature without a roadmap? Looking down the line.
absolutely. You absolutely can do it without a roadmap. So it's not that you don't have a list of things you want to work on. It's just you have limited data. And maybe as you get to be a larger company and you have more people helping you gather data and you have more customers and more data points, you could probably have more things that you're pretty certain you want to do. So therefore the roadmap can grow. So I'm not sure if this continues to work as as your company grows, like to be larger and larger. Simply because you can, like I said, you can have more data and you have more resources to tackle more items. And so you
Right.
have to prepare and groom, whatever people want to say, more stuff to prepare down the waterfall pipeline, to make sure it actually gets produced. Um, but large features, the thing is, large features require more data to be certain that you need to do them.
That's fair.
And because they're large and they're costly,
Yeah, and
right?
it takes time and resources, and especially if you're, I mean, it doesn't matter what you are. We're a huge company, and it still took a lot of resources to build a big feature. If you're a small
Yeah.
company, requires more of your bandwidth. So
Yeah.
yeah, you need to be sure about this
Sure.
big feature because it's a big feature.
Yeah. Every week you have to be super accurate. And if you're not always going to be accurate. You're going to build some things that actually people didn't care about that much. And then you got to look at that like, well, why did I build this?
Right.
What could I have learned? Maybe it was an experiment, but don't be doing 3-week experiments. So like, hey, let's try this thing. And I've done this before. Like I'm not a perfect, product manager, founder. It's like I've done this before where you spent 3 weeks on a feature that actually turned out no one cared about, and after that you have a little bit of trauma around this. You're like, whoa, I don't want to be doing that anymore.
Right.
I can't be doing that. But hey, I'm working on a big feature right now. Actually, it's been 3 weeks working on quite a large feature. My co-founder is, and so I'm programming and taking over a lot of smaller items while he's working on a bigger feature. And so we can still stay fast, we can still ship. But what's this big feature? It's been something that people have been asking for a few months, probably even longer. Maybe since we launched it, it's been on our mind. But it's a big feature, and we're not sure if we were ever ready to, like, when are we ready to invest in something this large? And finally, the data came together, and it's like, it's time. Because there's as you're gathering data, there's other things that are smaller and you have feedback on also that you can also do. So you prioritize those things. So big features are really hard to bubble to the top because they need so much support to say go do them.
Right.
While small features that take a day versus 3 weeks, like if you have 10 people say they want the small feature out of your 1,000 user base, and 10 people say they want the big feature, you're still going to do the small feature, right? You need like 80 people to tell you or 100 people to tell you that the big feature needs to happen, right? And then it's like, okay, it's time to do this thing. Because once again, big feature does not necessarily mean big value. Big value is when you have a lot of people asking for it, and then it's a trade-off of your time, your attention, the time of your team versus like what you're actually going to get out of it. Because there's a big risk if you don't have the data there. So we're building a big feature that actually finally finished with, but we believe it could be a huge thing for us doing this. And so it's this new content editing pipeline that, like, for what videos we select, basically, where we can now put it use human collaborators to help do a final check on things. And
nice.
Yeah, it actually turns out that we think this is probably going to be a little bit bigger than we thought. Most of our video selection was mostly automated in the past, but the automation can only go so far, even with how great AI is these days.
Right.
Not quite there. And so people have been asking for certain things. We're like, okay, maybe we can solve this problem through Band-Aid solutions. Like, okay, people report a clip, and we'll solve that clip that someone reports. But overall, there were a lot of things. Okay, it's just time to do this. We're ready to invest in this. That's not a roadmap issue. I think it's still within the way that I see things. I think when I'm talking about the bad things about a roadmap is when you start to get a lot of items on there that are wish lists from upper management at some companies,
Right.
or just wish lists from yourself. Like these, and they turn into these long conversations with your co-founder of like, hey, we could do this feature. This would be cool. This would be awesome. And then you guys do these Figma sessions and you're like, I want to do this feature and that feature. And it's not based in data. And then you're not working on it today. And you have all these conversations about what you could be doing and what things might get on a roadmap, or even just random ideas you have. And then you go on these side conversations about random ideas. They can be fun, but they're a waste of time a lot of times. It's like, you got to just be working. Like if every day, I mean, we work like, I don't know, 14, 15 hours, maybe closer to 14. Even an hour of that or 2 hours of that, just talking about stuff could really derail you.
Right.
Also, it's like, it's getting you off the point of like, what kind of culture do you want to create? And the culture that I want to create is a customer centric. Everything is coming from the customer. Everything is coming from either data that we're seeing on how users are behaving in our app, or direct feedback from people, and then conversations with those people about how they're using it, how they want to use it. Like, is it solving their problem? Are they learning? Are they finding it fun and easy? Like some of these things. And so anything that steps away from that conversation that doesn't have that as a central point, I try to stay away from.
That's awesome, and it seems like it's working. And with the growth that you've found, are you allowed to talk about the growth and where you're at with the
I'm
company
pretty
on that?
open talking about anything,
So,
honestly. Yeah.
like, in terms of income and revenue, it sounds like you guys are close to profitability, and
We're profitable. Yeah.
so
But
profitable in 1 year.
yeah, so profitability is funny. There's a lot of caveats with that. How much are you spending? And then that's the revenue numbers. So like I try to keep my lifestyle very cheap. So profitable is okay, we make back the money that we spend on marketing, plus a lot. And then we can pay for basic life expenses, which is not very much. I'm not going out, I'm working all day. It just pays for rent, it pays for food. So I can keep going. That's the profitability we're at. I think the really key, interesting aspect is, so obviously growth. Everyone's like, hey, what's your growth rate and what's your traction? It's like, what's the momentum that you have? And something pretty cool that's been consistent over the last 4 months is we've been growing at about average, I think 45% month over month. That probably can't keep up, but 20% month over month definitely can. This month we're already up 25% in the first like 10 days. And so that's pretty awesome. And that's kind of how I measure myself in my outcomes is like, okay, can I keep up growth? And what is stopping growth? Is it something in the product that's causing our profitability to drop as we expand our audience? Is it the methods that we're reaching our audience? Is it messaging? Is it distribution? Where's the point that's stopping us from continuing the growth trajectory? And so far, we don't have anything that's stopping us, but I'm still looking for all those low hanging fruit. Like, okay, what is the next thing that's gonna springboard us up and keep us growing 20 to 30% month over month, in the coming months. So, right, I mean, overall numbers though, still when you're small, it's good to be profitable, it's good to be growing, but realizing that it's still small because the vast majority of growth, 20% when you're making 10 million a year or even a month is way bigger than when you're making 10,000. But still, it's still good, for sure. But recognizing at the smaller numbers, it's a little bit easier for something random that works very well could give you big growth numbers. And so we're just around the 10,000 a month, revenue numbers. So like that's not bad for sure. I think it's a great step. But getting to where you can actually hire people, where you can actually scale something, you need to 10x that, right?
Right.
10,000 is not even enough to hire somebody,
But
right?
coming from starting in January, you're kind of starting to clock in January in a lot of ways, because this is in the latest iteration, the one that where you're making really the subscription model.
Yeah, using
Uh,
clips, TV,
yeah,
movies, all of this started in January. Yeah,
yeah.
and then the subscription model, we actually really didn't launch our business model until about April.
Wow. All right. I'm recording this in September, so yeah, I've been
Yeah.
very humble and very very modest. Do you have any? Are you able to share anything regarding how you feel like you've been able to achieve some of this growth
um,
beyond customer obsession and the ability to get them enthusiastic and build a community in Discord, which are these are each in and of themselves are each big pieces to the foundation and to be able to get to what you're doing.
yeah, there's so many pieces. And it's really like, what is success? What leads to success is such a great question. And what has led to, like, I wouldn't call myself successful right now. I would say that I'm on the path to it, and it still feels very anxiety ridden. I'm like, oh my God, are we going to make it? Like it's still like unsure and unclear. We're still, driving in the fog.
Right.
But getting to today, I recognize, hey, look, we actually have accomplished, something pretty cool. And some of the numbers outside of revenue actually look really, really good. Like our day one retention is about 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, our day 30 is 15%, which is really good because we have a free version of the app, and for free apps, it's performing very, very well. We actually don't monetize a huge part of the audience, and that's something that we're looking into doing soon. Not in a forced way, but like in providing value for people who don't get value out of the current subscription model.
Right.
And that's over 50% of our user base. So like we've got like 2,500 DAU, 20,000 monthlies. So like those numbers actually look pretty nice. And so like, I kind of think, oh, that's a little bit, I feel like we're doing better there than we are on the revenue side. But like, what is attributed to it? I think obviously coming in with so much knowledge of the language space because I've been in it for so long. When you're
Mm,
like industry expert, right? Even though I didn't work in this industry, so I had to learn a lot of the business side of things, and I still had to talk to customers, but I already knew a lot of language learners.
right.
Most of my friends are immigrants. I've lived in another country for a very long time, multiple countries. I've used every language learning app. I was already in the forums. This was already my pastime for a long time. So I think it was, um, who was it? It was someone at Anderson Horowitz. It might have been Anderson himself, who said like when you look at a company and whether or not it's going to be successful, a lot of it's like how much of the mind maze have they figured out before they started.
Mm,
And I did not start at zero. Although I made some weird product last year. Honestly, like a couple of them weren't that great, and I had a lot of learnings to do. So I don't know how much it helped, but it did help. Like that, I very much empathize and can be very compassionate with language learners, and I love having conversations. I do these user interviews like on video multiple times a week. It's like 5 of them at least, like actual on video, and they end up running like 2 hours because we just talk. We're like, hey, oh, what show have you watched recently? Like, what did you
mm.
find hard about it? Stuff like this is really fun. So I'd say that obviously a certain amount of determination and how much I work. I think work obsession is pretty important, but ChatGPT has been very useful for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a programmer. I actually built the very first MVP myself last year at the beginning of the year. Before I had co-founders, I just like, all right, I want to build something. I don't know any coders around me, so I'm just going to try to code it, and then I'll try to find people. But in the meantime, I'm not going to wait. So I had already
Right.
designed the whole thing, and I'm like, well, maybe I can try to code it. But after ChatGPT came out, I was messing around with coding, and I'm like, wow, I can actually be, like even though like that's not, I don't have a background in that, I can be useful, and so I take smaller tasks when marketing is all set in stone and user data and talking to users, like there's a gap. I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to take this task that we know we need to do. It's kind of small. It's like one day, and I'll just go work on it. Um,
So you'll take some of the smaller ticket items off the plate of your technical co-founder yourself using ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean things like um, we can change the UX formatting of something. Like I changed the way we do our review system for reviewing words. Everyone wanted a different ordering of how it looks and how it works. And so I just say throw it in chat, throw the code into ChatGPT. Hey, explain how this works. This is what I want to accomplish, and work through it with them. And then I can ship some code, fix a couple of bugs. You know, it's like, hey, this is a bug that's happening. Here's the code that it's supposedly happening in. Where could it be happening? And then it's like, hey, throw some console logs over here. Let's see what the data looks like, and then we just fix it. So like, I think non-technical people have an ability now more than ever, especially if they're the type that likes figuring out stuff, um, and is fine getting opening up VS Code and opening up the code base and working with it. And ChatGPT can help you with that, by the way. It can explain how VS Code works, explain how I use the console. Like it did all that for me, right? And I think non-technical co-founders, when they have gaps in the early days, when you're like, hey, look, right now is not the time to increase our marketing spend. Right now is like we need to build a few things, and that's the bottleneck. I mean, I remember this talk from Michael Siebel at YC when he was talking about Twitch, and he's like, "Hey, there were months where he had nothing to do because he was on the business side and they needed to build stuff.
Right.
You don't need those months anymore. He could just open up ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, give me some tasks." Like anyone can. It's not that difficult, actually. I think as long as you're willing to put in the work. And then it's helped me on the marketing side. I used it to build a Chrome extension that helps me with some influencer research. And actually, I've been giving it out to some collaborators to work with who've been taking some of the research off my plate, like interns. So
That's phenomenal. So, there's a lot of ChatGPT. I talk about ChatGPT in a lot of different ways. And there's conversations whether it takes high performers and makes them even more performant, or takes low performers and makes them, kind of higher level. Here we're at a place where there's a bootstrapping founder is able to, through not too much difficulty, use ChatGPT to take off some of the stuff from the plate of the technical co-founder, let them focus on the bigger tasks and add more of the resources. And I think it sounds like you're doing that from the marketing side as well. I do love the applications of ChatGPT in resource constrained areas. And there's nothing more like that than a, you know, a bootstrap startup. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing, Jason, and just kind of grounding this in LA. What's the most LA thing that's happened to you?
Oh man, I was a little bit dreading this question because, like, to be honest, I don't really get out that much. You would think I do. I mean, I go to a couple of these meetups, and I go to your group sometimes as well. Um, and I don't really think I have any like LA thing. Like, I haven't run into celebrities. I just meet a lot of startup founders, I guess.
They're
And
not
I
just celebrities aren't just like hanging around your apartment.
no, and like, yeah, I mean, my cat is maybe my cat could be a celebrity someday. He's funny, but yeah, I mean, I think like I think it's cool that it happens. I haven't been here that long, to be honest. I've only been here for less than 2 years,
Okay.
so I
And
haven't had
just
anything.
post COVID. So yeah, it was probably still opening up as you got here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not quite into the whole scene just yet. Oh wait, you know what? Okay, hold on. I forgot about one thing that happened. There is one thing that happened.
There you
Okay,
go.
I got invited to an event. It was actually in Culver City, and from a Japanese friend, and it was a Japanese clothing brand that was launching. And I totally forgot. I went to this thing. It was this gorgeous house in their backyard, and the cast of Crazy Rich Asians was there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a small event, maybe like less than 50 people, but it was mostly just it was a Japanese brand, and a lot of my friends are Japanese, and I don't think a lot of the Crazy Rich Asians cast members are Japanese though, but it was like Japanese and then all their Asian Americans, and there were some people from a few of the Asian based TV shows.
I mean, I would have to say that's pretty LA if you're just following a friend to some party, to some opening of something, and like the cast of one of the most popular movies of the decade come out.
Yeah, yeah, we got to talk a little bit too. Honestly, I can't remember his name right now, but it was the main male actor. But yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't I can recall his face, but I don't know. I couldn't
it's
recall his
sad because I've
name.
seen the movie like 3 times.
Well, thank you again so much, Jason, for coming down to the studio. It's great to have you, and thank you so much for sharing so much about Umi and how you're building it. It's phenomenal. I'm excited to hear how you guys continue to grow.
Yeah,
Uh,
appreciate having me. It's been really fun. Always fun to talk.
oh yeah, absolutely. Our guest today is Jason Sharp. The app is Umi UMI, available on the app stores. Like to thank our sponsors, PMALA and Unida. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And if you enjoy what you're hearing, please smash that subscribe button. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Founders in LA.